What's up, guys? Barry Gaming here, back with some more news, some more Idle Heroes news for January 22nd, 2025. I'm a loss for words because we have the skill card for Great Sage Sun Wukong, and the amount of brain freeze I'm going through trying to understand all the keywords and what's going on took me a bit to understand this character. This is definitely one you need a PhD for when reading through the abilities to truly understand what is going on for each one of these. So there's two different modes this hero has, kind of like the Mockman starting the front row, back row, similar type thing, but very different ways of triggering it. And the hero does look like maybe, potentially, kind of, replaces Hyperspace Hunter Aylamak. Very similar role, but a little better, kind of. So let's jump right into it. There's a lot to go through here because this is a confusing hero. We're going to break it down piece by piece, and then I'll give you guys my opinion on this hero. Hopefully you guys enjoy this one. Let's jump right into it. Okay, so here we have it. Great Sage Sun Wukong. Let's blow this up a little bit more, make it a little bigger for you guys to see. We do have the full artwork now, which is cool as well. And yes, he is the Transcendence warrior that's going to be coming out during Chinese New Year. So let's start with his active skill. There is a lot to talk about with Havoc of Lingzhou Palace. So this will deal damage to all enemies, which again, I was really hoping we were going to have a single target damage dealer. It seems to be another AoE damage dealer. Don't know if it's going to be better than Vulcan or not. We'll find out. Reducing the backline enemy's armor and damage reduction for several rounds afterwards. So attack number 2 deals attack damage with a guaranteed crit to backline enemies. This damage cannot be dodged or blocked. And then it deals attack armor ignoring damage, number 3, to the enemy with the highest attack. Then, if Self has more than a certain amount of HP when he releases his active skill, he's going to deduct a certain percentage of his HP from Self and generates a shield equal to a certain percentage of that HP lost. When Self is under Immortal Soul status, so he has two different statuses, Immortal Soul and Universe Imitation, I believe it is. So the first one is Immortal Soul. So this is one, when this one is triggered, he'll then additionally grant all allies a shield equal to a certain percentage of attack and increase their damage reduction for several rounds. When you're under the other one, which is Universe Imitation status, additionally inflicts Divine Retribution damage, aka you can go through Divine Shield and all that, or Unbending Will, to the enemy with the highest attack and restores lost HP. So he does have a way to leech stuff back, but he has to be in Universe Imitation. Immortal Soul is kind of like the more support version of it, it seems like, whereas Universe Imitation seems like the offensive version because it's also healing him. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Second ability, change the base attack to deals damage to frontline enemies. No. Reduces their control immunity for several rounds and bleeds them, dealing attack damage for several rounds. So at least there is like some sort of bleed synergy here. I don't know if I'm a fan of it. Invulnerable Body passive skill. If Self has more than a certain HP after being healed, he will then enter Immortal Soul. So this is how he gets to these two different states for several rounds. If Self has a certain number or less HP after taking damage, he will then enter Universe Imitation. So it seems like you need like a healer or something maybe on this team too, because if he has more than a certain HP after getting a heal, that's going to trigger him into that more defensive stance, more support role. And then if Self has a certain number or less HP, so maybe like 50% or less HP after taking damage, that's when he's going to go into that Universe Imitation. That's where he's also going to be able to, you know, leech HP. So he has survivability, but only if he like drops below a certain percentage HP. Most of his abilities, of course, are tied to his active skill. Allies and enemies will be affected by different effects according to the status he enters. So when you enter Immortal Soul, it increases the damage reduction, self-damage reduction, and control immunity. Up to several layers of this can be stacked. And then to the allies of your team, increases damage reduction for several rounds and grants a shield equal to a certain percentage of attack, and additionally increases their damage reduction for several rounds. So again, this Immortal Soul, very defense, very team oriented. This is kind of a cool way to just, you know, get shields on the entire team. But it's when he gets hit versus like Hyperspace Hunter Aylamak, depends on the block percentage that the hero has, and then a percentage of their attack, stuff like that. So very interesting. And then the second portion of that right there is broken into the Universe Imitation version, increases self-attack and holy damage up to several rounds and can be stacked. To all allies, they also get holy damage for several rounds, and to all enemies inflicts a certain percentage of attack as divine retribution, with a chance to inflict fragile, and a chance to inflict stun for several rounds can be triggered up to a certain number of times every single round. So fragile is a new keyword, and they put it down here. Skill effect, not stackable. When the target with fragile takes a basic attack or active skill, they will take extra damage equal to a certain percentage of their max HP, will be removed after triggering fragile. Caps at a certain percentage of course, Sun Wukong's attacks. So, I mean, it's kind of cool because there's a chance for like affect all enemies with that fragile state, so could be interesting to see how much damage that does. And then the last passive here, when self is under Immortal Sun, remember that more team-based buffing type ability, you're immune to petrify effects. Counterattacks when taking basic attack damage or active attack damage, dealing a certain percentage of his attack that is armor ignoring damage to random enemies, prioritizing any target with fragile. When enemies fragile is triggered, grants all allies a shield equal to a certain percentage of attack. When self is under the universe imitation, which seems to be the more offensive one, immune to shape-shifting effects. Chases and attacks random enemies when allies release their basic or active skills, kind of like Yorm Tum, for a certain percentage of attack that is divine retribution damage to them, and prioritizes, of course, fragile enemies. When they lose their fragile and it's triggered, increases all allies holy damage. So again, more damage, more damage, more damage. Don't know if it's good or not. And then finally, we have a very, very basic clean-cut core of origin skill. When self enters Immortal Soul status, increase all allies control immunity for several rounds. And then when self enters Universe Imitation status, increases all allies all damage dealt for several rounds. Now that might sound pretty cut and dry on paper, but because of this ability here, this Invulnerable Body, I think it can happen like multiple times in a round, because remember, these things happen when a certain thing goes on. So if you have more than a certain amount of HP and then you're healed, you're going to go to Immortal Soul. Then you take an attack and you maybe drop below a certain amount of HP. You then trigger Universe Imitation. Then one of your heroes goes and you heal. Then you go back to Immortal Soul. So these things can go back and forth, triggering back and forth. I think this Core of Origin might be kind of decent here, because you can get these to trigger multiple times in a round, supposedly, and if it can stack, that'll be cool. If it can't stack, then it's kind of a little useless, but technically it sounds like you can increase all allies control immunity and increase all allies damage dealt at the same, well, not at the same time, but they can trigger in the same round and potentially go on to me more. So I don't know how this sounds just yet. Initial impressions doesn't sound crazy. It does sound like more of a support slash damage hybrid role, kind of like a Doppelganger Natalia almost. And then finally, oh man, this is not great. We got Yorm Tum, Alakita, and oh my gosh, this is just, oh, what are these tenants? They're like all like assassins, which means the stat line is one of the worst possible in the game. I mean, the only one that makes sense is the first one, because it's always like one of the options is the main body hero that can be, you know, the tenant for them. This is abysmal. This is absolutely horrible. I don't know who designs these. I'm guessing they just probably have like a flow chart and like, oh yeah, it's his turn, but they don't put any thought process into this. If they actually took the time and built tenant spots smart, I think that could be a huge shakeup in the meta, but they don't, and things like this means he's never going to be the main damage dealer on your account from the looks of it. So let me know what you guys think. I don't know if I'm sold just by the description. We'll have to see what his actual skills look like on Chinese New Year. Don't know if I'll be streaming it just yet, because I do have a wedding to go to, so I'll have to see. Hopefully you guys enjoy this one. I'll see you guys next time.